Today we are going to talk about pest control. Pest control specifically for indoor plants, but a lot of the products that I have used in the past can be used both places. You can use them outside or you can use them inside. That's really important because in the winter, if you're bringing stuff in to overwinter to keep it safe from freezing temperatures, you're going to want to use pest control before you bring that plant into your house, just in case it's been exposed to anything outside. But for your indoor plants, I'm going to talk about a couple of products that are non-toxic and work really, really well, and both are organic. Again, I don't get paid to sponsor these products. They're just what I actually use and what I used when I worked in a greenhouse. We're going to start with something called Safer. Safer is a safe plant insecticide. It is organic, which means you can use it on food products as well as houseplants, tropicals, pretty much any kind of plant. These products that I'm going to show you treat a lot of the most common pests, but always read the label of any product that you're buying and double check that it does cover the particular thing that you're trying to get rid of, and make sure you follow the directions closely. Take my advice, but make sure that you're reading and you're doing your own research before you start using these products. So Safer, I love. It's non-toxic. That means it's not going to harm kids, it's not going to harm pets, and it's going to be something that doesn't smell bad in the house. It also helps to kind of repel further infestations. If maybe you miss something, it'll kind of help you long term. But when you have an infestation, it's not a one-time use thing. None of these products are. If you have an infestation in your house, you're going to need to treat more than once, and you're going to need to do it for at least a couple of weeks. Usually, depending on how bad my infestation is, it can take me probably 8 treatments. Most products are good for up to 8 weeks before you need to retreat. So if you have a really bad infestation, you may need to do it more than once between the 8 weeks. And if you have a lot of plants and a lot of leaves like I do, you may need to get more than one bottle, in which case you're going to want to get a concentrate. So the concentrate is not so bad to use. It's actually pretty easy. It saves you money. But you don't need this unless you have a large number of plants or you have to use it on a regular basis and want to use it inside and outside. A product that is also okay for growing plants and vegetables, it's organic and it's non-toxic, is the Captain Jack's brand of neem oil, and this one is called Neem Max. I like this one, but the trick is when you're using neem oil, it is one of the most effective things for a huge, broad variety of problem pests, but it smells funky, and there's no way around that. Neem oil just smells funky. Now, with the Captain Jack's version, you can use it indoors, and because it's diluted if you're using a concentrate, or it also comes in a already mixed spray bottle, it doesn't smell as bad as stronger neem oil products that mostly people use outside. And most of that, in my opinion, is because it does stink. However, this particular product is not nearly as stinky as some of the other ones that I've used. And neem oil is my go-to product for most of the issues that I've ever come across. Because I need to use it indoors most of the time, I use it if I really have to. Like if I have a bad infestation, if multiple plants that are grouped together are all showing signs of that infestation, I'll usually go in for the Neem Max. But when it's just a couple of little things, or I'm treating a plant that I just purchased from a nursery and I need to make sure that it's safe before I put it with my other plants, I'll go with Safer. Safer is not super stinky, and it is actually pretty good for the leaves, and it'll add a little bit of shine to the leaves. Both products will work well to repel new bugs as long as you've fully eradicated the current bugs. It's one of those things where it's kind of up to you. You can get this stuff in most retail stores, so you can take a smell and see how bad it is. But remember, if you're buying a concentrate, it's going to be an intense smell. So smell is really the only deterrent that I have to recommend these two products to differentiate between the two of them. I feel like the Nemax is more effective if you are really having a problem, but if you just notice them, say it's thrips or spider mites, Safer is going to work just great. And if you don't have a huge number of plants, it's a good option just to have on hand. I always have some on hand, but because I have a huge number of plants, I tend to go with something that's strong and will nuke everything that I'm trying to nuke. So one of the things I also recommend is when you buy a new plant, whether it's from a nursery or it's from a store like a grocery store, or even if it's a cutting or something you're getting from a friend or someone you know, isolate it before you put it next to any other plants. Sometimes a bug infestation has just begun and it might not even be noticed, especially when you purchase it. I always isolate, and usually for up to 2 weeks. I also pre-treat any new plant that I bring into the house. And normally I'll do that with Safer, because if I don't think the plant has a problem, I prefer to use a thing that's a little less stinky, and it's really more of a preventative. Sometimes you'll get a plant and it looks perfectly fine, and you just put it next to your other plants, assuming it came from a reputable store, and you may find that you end up with an infestation. So I definitely isolate for about 2 weeks before I mix any other new plants with my other plants. Part of that is because I do have a huge number of plants, but you should do it even at home, even if you only have a couple of plants, because there's no sense in getting something started that you didn't necessarily have a problem with before. What to look for to know what kind of pests you're dealing with, because when you buy a product like this, you want to try and make sure that it actually treats that pest. Now, neem oil products tend to treat a vast array of problems. Captain Jack's brand also has a few other products that are more specific and are used systemically. Systemic products are products that will be fed into the plant. Oftentimes you'll mix them into the soil, and over time the plant absorbs that, and then when bugs try to eat it, they don't like it, it deters them from even getting started. That is not necessary for all pests, but it is something to remember that if you have a pest that starts at the soil, or a pest that is really, really difficult to control with just spray-on products, that those are available. Do a little research online, check with some of the companies that I recommend. They usually on their websites have a lot of great information, and it's pretty simple to understand. Dish soap is another thing that people recommend. Diluted dish soap sprayed on plants or used to wipe down leaves that are showing signs of infection. For me, it's not my favorite thing. I usually like to get in there and nuke stuff right away at the very beginning, the moment I notice something. It does leave a little bit of residue, but it's not going to hurt the plant. Often I will hear people recommend using a diluted bleach to try to do the same thing. I will never do that. It scares me. I think it's horrible, and I don't want to risk not diluting it enough because there are different recommendations about how much to dilute it, and I'm not a fan of bleach. I try to avoid anything that might be harmful to my lizard, my dogs, the kids, any other critters that come through this house. Now, for things like flies, if you bought a plant or have noticed flies, and the best thing that I can advise is look for a product that specifically treats them. Both of these do. But I change out the soil. The moment I notice something like that starting, I take that plant, I dump out that soil, and I mean I get rid of that soil, I don't even keep it. And I put fresh, new, healthy soil, and then I'll also treat it after I've done that to make sure that we're not dealing with different stages of bugs' lives, from eggs to larvae, etc. For me, that seems to work best. I just chuck the old soil, completely repot that plant, and treat it to make sure that I've gotten ahead of those different stages of the bug life. And most of these products will do the same thing, and they will give you information online and on the bottles that will help you out with that. Another thing is going to upset you a little bit. Sometimes, depending on the kind of plant I have, if an infestation has gotten out of hand, I will remove the leaves, because treating every single leaf is absolutely necessary with any kind of bug infestation. And for things like my plumeria trees, that one back there, I know that the leaves will grow back fairly quickly. And because it is such a large plant, because I have 2 of those in my house, Treating every single leaf is a nightmare, especially because I then have to treat every single plant that I have grouped around that plant. So with a plumeria, I will remove all of the leaves. I will treat the soil, and I will treat the stems, and I'll treat the trunk. It's easier that way. I know it looks bad at first, and it's pretty upsetting, especially if it was really pretty in the beginning and had fabulous leaves. But that's just what I do, because treating every single leaf on as many plants as I have, even just in one grouping, it's a literal nightmare. It doesn't happen too often now, but I have made the mistake of putting plants with old plants that I just bought and reaping the rewards of that. So that's an unfortunate thing, but there are a lot of plants you really can't do that with. For instance, philodendrons and monstera especially, they're huge. Any kind of huge leaf seems like it would be easy to treat, but you can't cut those leaves off because the leaves are the plant. So you can't do it with everything. But when you're doing pest removal, you need to make sure you're treating the underside of the leaf especially, because most of these critters like to get under the new growth, and they like to be underneath the actual leaf itself. I treat top and bottom. I treat stems. I basically leave no space untreated, because you might not notice something that is on the stem, it's not on the leaves, and it will work its way up to the leaves. Products with neem oil I love, because they're not going to get back on that leaf you've treated if you do it several times in a row. Now, if I'm dealing with a really bad infestation or a plant that has a lot of leaves and it's hard to get every single leaf, I will check every few days. Sometimes I'll check every 3 or 4 days, and I may treat once a week for at least a few weeks. So let's see, what else am I doing? I'm looking at my notes. Let's see. Treating the plants around the infestation. It's not good enough to just treat the plant you noticed a problem with, because a lot of infestations just spread. You've got plants that are grouped closely together, they're just going to spread, especially with something like spider mites, because spider mites make these tiny little filament webs, and those can literally be blown by the air conditioning unit from one plant to the next plant. Something else to think about is when you're treating your plants, if any kind of pests get on your clothes and you don't notice, and you go from one plant or one grouping of plants to another, you yourself can actually expose the other plants to that pest. I even put my hair back, especially if I'm dealing with taller things like some of my trees. I put my hair back. I don't want anything when I'm spraying leaves like this. I don't want anything falling in my hair. I don't want plant debris falling in my hair. I don't want the product I'm using to treat getting in my hair. I don't want it to get on my clothes, and I don't want it to spread it. So a lot of times I'll go ahead and change shirts after I've treated something to make sure that I'm not walking around the house like that. One of my friends that I used to work with at the garden center, he went home and didn't realize he had mealybugs on his shirt, and he noticed them crawling once he got home on his shoulder. And not only did it gross him out and give him the willies, but he realized, like he had just brought those home to his own plants, because one of the first things he did is he would go out and water his plants after work at his house. So be aware that pests can actually get on you, and they're not going to hurt you, but you can be the one who delivers them to the next plant. Terrifying, I know. Oh, one more thing that I want to cover is disinfecting your pruning shears. If you are cutting leaves off of or trimming a plant that is a known disease, a known fungus infection, or a known pest problem, you really need to disinfect them before you use them on another plant. Especially things like funguses. You don't want to spread it. So you can do a diluted bleach solution, or I will use hand sanitizer in between, so that I make sure I'm not spreading stuff. I also try to keep my pruning shears separate. Those that I use outside, I keep those pruning shears separate from those that I use inside. Again, that's because I am going to treat them both, but I want to make sure that there's no chance anything from the outside comes in. Because I overwinter my plants, before I bring them in for the winter, I treat all of them. When I'm treating stuff outside, this is a lifesaver. This, I just connect to the hose, I read my directions, I put the right amount in here, and I can treat a large number of plants. And before I overwinter them, I treat them more than once. I treat them at least twice. If I know there's some kind of infestation, or I've noticed something starting, or my neighbors have something that I've noticed, I might treat up to 3 times before I even bring those plants inside. Now, for safety and precaution, and also so that you're not stinky when you're using any kind of products, wear gloves. I wear gloves. I have sensitive skin, and when I'm spraying, a tiny bit of mist that's coming back on me, I really don't want that on my skin. Even though these are organic and they're fairly safe and I'm not scared of them, I still don't want it on my skin. I still don't want to have any residual stinkiness. And I try generally, especially because I do have to use them so often, to just keep myself safe, not breathe the mist. If it's really bad infestation or really big plants, or even if I'm outside sometimes, I'll go ahead and put on a mask. And I mean, I just use, like a COVID style mask. But I have gloves that have rubber to make sure that I'm not absorbing any of that into my skin. And I really like my giant dish gloves, because when I'm spraying, if it's coming down like this, it's going to get on the back of your arm. So generally I prefer these just because they cover more of my skin. If you guys have any other questions or anything that you would like me to cover specifically with regard to pest control, let me know in the comments, and if I don't know, I will find out and I will share that information with you. Like and subscribe. Let me know what you want me to cover in the next video, and I'll see you later. Have fun gardening. Bye guys.